There's probably only 4 directors I can think of that not only do film nerds know, but I'd say the everyday public knows, that being Spielberg, Hitchcock, George Lucas and Quentin Tarantino. It's a marvel Tarantino is on that list, as his films at first glance are extremely violent, very talky, very meta. You'd think his filmography would be destined to only establish a cult-like following, yet for 25 years he's been one of the most popular and iconic auteurs in the industry. Most of his films are a success from a critical and commercial standpoint, and influenced a wave of wannabe to would-be filmmakers. Hell, I'd even admit to his films as well as Scorsese's being the gateway to my passion of the art form. He also has one of the most interesting filmographies out of the director's realm, with people often disagreeing of its ranking from best to worst. While I enjoy all his movies to some extent, I'm here to give my personal ranking from best to worst Tarantino's filmography. I'm only ranking the films he wrote and directed, so films like True Romance, Dusk Till Dawn and Natural Born Killers are obviously cut from the list. Starting at number 10 is Death Proof. This is almost universally seen as his worst film, and there are many good arguments as to why. Mainly, the once razor-sharp wit and lyricism of Tarantino's pen game, just for whatever reason, isn't here. The usual dialogue set pieces of characters chatting around a table, which in this film there are many, often fall flat and bleed into tedium. They often feel like they are written like a Tarantino impersonator. The grindhouse aesthetic the film goes for is inconsistent as well. The first half of the film has an annoying scratch film filter all over it, which is then suddenly dropped by the second half. Which, speaking of which, I don't remember seeing many 70s grindhouse films this lacking in action. There's really only 2 action set pieces throughout its running time, and the rest of it is filled with Tarantino's most forgettable cast of characters delivering his most unquotable lines. It's not all bad though. The final car chase is fantastic, thrilling, and so satisfying that it makes the film worth watching. Also, Quentin's analysis on feminism and its ties to the slasher genre is pretty interesting. I like how the women in the first half are very male dependent, a lot more kind of girly girls, and seemingly because of this they all die horrifically at the hands of the antagonist of the film, stuntman Mike, played by Kurt Russell. Yet in the second half, there is a new group of tomboyish, gear-headed women that are introduced and manage to overcome the same villain, which is a pretty interesting analysis how feminism and the slasher genre for some reason have a weird symbiotic relationship with each other. So the film's not without merit, but I'd only recommend it if you love the director's other work. This is not a good starting point for newcomers. Number 9 is Kill Bill Volume 1. This might be a hot take putting this film this high on the list, as I know a lot of people who love this movie, and quite frankly, there is a lot to love. The film drips in style and self-assurance. The non-linear plot, the split screens, the black and white sequences, the anime sequences, the fourth wall breaks. It's almost dizzying in its stylistic excess, more so than any other one of his films, which to me comes with a great sacrifice to plot and character development, which the film depends on its sequel to flesh out the narrative a lot more. That's all well and good, but it leaves this film with not a lot under the surface. But hey, at least the surface is great fun. The blood-infested final set piece at the House of the Blue Leaves is one of the best action sequences of the 2000s. It's got some of Tarantino's best needle drops, whether it be the opening credits hauntingly married to Nancy Sinatra's Bang Bang, or the arrival of O-Ren Ishii and the Crazy 88 walking in tandem with the Battle Without Honor or Humanity score plucked from its original source material of the same name, and recontextualised to make Tarantino's most parodied scene. Also is the introduction of the bride, played by Uma Thurman. Again, there's not much to her character in this film, but she's fun to watch, and that goes to the rest of the film as well. Number 8, Kill Bill Volume 2. As I said before, this takes the setup and characters of the last film and puts more meat to their bones. We learn a lot more about the relationship between the bride and Bill, which the final verbal exchange between them in his living room is one of the director's more overlooked dialogue set pieces. It's poetic, cathartic, surprising, and very funny. I love how we transition from the East and the samurai genre from the last film to the West and the Western genre with this film, as not only it gives each film a distinguishable identity, but Bud, played by Quentin regular Michael Madsen, playing an updated and long past his days cowboy archetype which the film's first act mainly concentrates on, is one of the more underrated Tarantino antagonists in my opinion. Even though the story has more depth to it in this film, the story itself ain't nothing new, and Tarantino doesn't much to subvert the conventions of the revenge film as he often does with his other genre films. As I don't blame him, as the revenge genre has always been somewhat of a restrictive genre to be assessed with in terms of its themes. You're kind of trapped by its narrative function and assessing the themes of the nature of violence, which can be a vague one, and Quentin doesn't give any new perspective on the matter. But still, the film's very good, and watching the 2 Kill Bill films back to back do raise each other's quality, but as they were released separately, I'll rank them separately. Number 7, Django Unchained. This is the first film to find itself on this list that's a part of Tarantino's revisionist era films, and to me it's the weakest out the lot, which goes to show how strong the other films are. This is the first film so far out the list that I can comfortably call great. It's weird to think that a blaxploitation slave trade western made by a middle-aged white man seemingly ignited the new wave of black movies in the 10s, which thankfully would be made by African American directors, as the American slave trade being a topic in film was very much a rarity in 2012, and I commend Tarantino's bravery to set his film during it. But let's not get it twisted, its focus is more on telling a classical western story, which Tarantino has been constantly flirting in doing through his whole filmography to this point. And as a western, it's great. Django and Dr. King Schultz, played by Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz, have a great student and teacher dynamic whose roles reverse as the film goes on in a very clever and surprising way. The two characters that mirror the protagonists are Calvin Candy and Steven, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Samuel Jackson, and they just make a great dastardly duo, which again, the relationship between servant and master are switched as the film goes on. These little details in Tarantino's writing and character dynamic sets him apart from everyone else. And when these four characters meet in the film's second act, it's absolute fireworks. Not that the film's first act is bad at all, it's actually reminiscent of lighter early 60s Men on a Mission western films. But yeah, when the four characters sit down at the dinner table at Candy's compound, there's a 20 to 30 minute stretch of prime Tarantino with some of the best stuff he's ever done. The dinner scene is ungodly suspenseful on the first watch, and it's climaxed by an amazing blood-soaked opera of a shootout with Tupac and James Brown playing as its anthem. It's amazing stuff. But to me, the great fault of the film is that it should have ended right after the shootout. But the film neatly goes on for another 25 minutes or so, and the wind gets sucked out of its sails, and the film's momentum just evaporates, only for the film to actually end with another shootout with the same characters in the same location. Why? Tarantino can be a self-indulgent writer and make things go on longer when they need to, and this is one of the biggest examples of that Achilles heel in his writing. If it ended where I think it should have ended, the film would be higher on the list, but as it is, it's number 7. Number 6, Reservoir Dogs. At one point, believe it or not, this was my number 1 pick out of his whole entire filmography. On subsequent viewings, however, it's lost some of its flavour, maybe because I've watched it a stupid amount of times, or the fact that the film, instead of trapping us in the warehouse where all the characters are hiding and panicking, it makes to me these needless detouring flashbacks of the robbers getting recruited, which apart from Mr. Orange's flashback, why do we need to see these? I get the character development I need to just from the situation taking place in the present. I don't really need to see how they got there in the first place as being recruited by their boss, Joe. It just fizzles out the electricity and pacing of what's going on with them in the present day, combating with each other in the warehouse. But yeah, as a first watch, this film is pretty explosive. I mean, for a first-time auteur, is there a more perfect coming-out party for a new writer and director than the opening breakfast scene and the strutting opening title sequence? The sequences just scream charisma and coolness and connotes to the audience laying their eyes on it for the first time in 1992. Watch out, a new filmmaker's come to town and he's gonna change everything. Of course, there's the infamous torture scene, which is still hard to watch to this day, but I find the reveal of Mr. Orange's identity that the torture scene so smoothly yet explosively leads into way more of a jaw-dropper and an underrated moment in the film. Make sure you tune in where part 2 of Quentin Tarantino's top 5 films will be ranked by me.